Howdy. Welcome to Hacking in the Dark episode 2. So today I'm just going to show you kind of what my note-taking flow looks like in Roam. I know some folks have used Roam to far greater advantage than I have, and some folks are kind of understandably skeptical that this thing that people keep talking about on Twitter, Roam cult, is something that they are interested in. I know I've talked to several folks that are kind of on the fence about whether they want to use this for their, whatever you want to call it, your second brain, which is Tiago Forte's kind of big thing. And I'll just show you how I use it. I'm not sure that I'm using it perfectly. I've picked some things up here and there. Nate Eliason, I think, has done some videos and Twitter threads where he kind of goes into how he uses it, and I've definitely picked up some things from him. So I've just got a little sort of book holder thing here out for me to be able to flip through the pages as I'm taking notes. So you can see here, I've just got a sort of a basic page here for The Prince, which I'm going to be taking notes on. I've already read this book, but I'm just kind of going back. This is one challenge that I have, is I've highlighted and underlined a lot of stuff in physical books, and I kind of need to go back and put that into some sort of digital format. I think Roam makes sense for that, and I've been using it to take notes, sort of my first pass of notes for the book Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. And you can see, let me turn the filter off here. So, I kind of break it down by parts. I'm still starting part 2 here, but I break it down by part and then by individual section. So that makes it really easy to kind of, go back and sort of review my notes for a particular chapter or whatnot. I also had up the filter thing earlier, so I can filter on quote. And I haven't done that everywhere. I need to I've evolved my note-taking process even as I've done this for my first sort of book that I've seriously taken notes for. So I need to go back and add quote tags to everything that I want here. But yeah, so here's an example, Sir Christopher Llewellyn Smith saying, when I ask an economist, the answer always boils down to just bribing people. So Rory's big point with this book is basically that orthodox economic thought isn't necessarily the most helpful tool for every single problem. It has its uses, but he's a big advocate for what he calls alchemy or magic. So I'm still making my way through this book. I've found it enjoyable so far. He's a very big proponent of Nassim Taleb. So one of the things that I usually do is call out, if there's a person who's referenced in a book or elsewhere, I usually include a sort of link to them. So here's a quote from Taleb. There's no such thing as a rational or irrational belief. There is only rational or irrational behavior. So what he's getting at there is it doesn't really matter how you describe a belief or whatever. Like, it's not really the important thing. It's more about, what is a useful action or an advantageous thing that you've done, not rational justification that you've made up in your mind. So that's a big point throughout Alchemy. But anyway, I'll get back to The Prince here. So I have this books page that makes it really easy to kind of click between, and I've got it starred here, up in the top right. You've got a little star there, so I can quickly jump around between writers, books that I find interesting. So one handy tip is the shift click. So that'll open up whatever page you click on in the sidebar here. So I don't have a whole lot for The Prince yet. It's basically just a skeleton page at this point. I haven't started taking notes. But so I'll click over there. And then, I can pull up Machiavelli here. So I've got this writer's page for Machiavelli. And so I include links to his books. I haven't actually started taking any notes I haven't read the Discourses on Livy yet. That's future project. But you can see it's super easy for me to create a new page and sort of leave it as a reminder for myself, or if I need to reference it later. Machiavellian context is one that Adam Townsend, one of my favorite Twitter followers, mentioned. So I included the tweet here. And one of the big things that I like to do with Rome is include the provenance of ideas and recommendations, so that I know, if someone recommends a book and I'm not actively reading it or whatever, but I thought it was interesting, that I might want to revisit it later, I might include kind of a quote or a suggestion from somebody to read something, and that way I know, okay, well, Adam recommended it. I trust Adam. Adam's a smart guy. He's given, I really liked his recommendation of Epictetus as well. And so, I like to have that kind of trail back to where did an idea or recommendation come from. I think a lot of times it's easy to keep a list of all the books that you've been recommended, right? I've probably got 100 books in my list of, things to do. It's hard to know how relevant they'll be or who recommended them, how high quality they are, right? So including this kind of source detail is useful. But in any case, so you can kind of see my Machiavelli page here. One thing, I think there's a way to just copy this. Yeah, see, that's not what I want. I think there's a way to do this that doesn't sort of remove it from its current page, but I haven't figured out how to do it yet. Control click. That's how you do it. So if you control click on a bullet point, you can just go and include it in another page. So that might be useful if, there was some context about Machiavelli that I had written down and I wanted to directly link it to a quote of his, right? Like tie some bit of his character or a quote from another book or a quote from a biography of Machiavelli or something like that, then I could sort of drag that over and include it as context. The other way that you can do that is the block search. So I can also search for... And that just does a full text search of all the individual blocks, sort of in my database. And you can see it auto completes here. So I pull that, the same quote, and it pulls that in as a block. So that can be handy, quotes, context, that sort of thing. So one of the things that I briefly showed a minute ago is filtering on quotes. So you can filter down. I usually do this on a new line just for clarity. So you can see I've filtered down to just the quotes, and I could filter on power, although I don't really have other quotes in here yet, so it doesn't do anything. But you can imagine if I've taken a book's worth of notes and I just want to get to the sort of quotes about some particular topic, I can filter that down super easily. I can also look at the graph. So this shows me the different connections to different pages that I've got, right? So obviously I've got the books page. Here you can see sort of the graph of my books. So I have not included anywhere near all the books that I would like to here, but I've included some common ones, and you can see from alchemy that I've obviously sort of I've included spent the most time taking notes on it of any of my other books. So you can sort of see the universe of things that I link to. It's also you can see the weights, the number of other links to a particular page. So alchemy is obviously the huge dot here, and then I can already just tell, even without zooming in, that this is Nassim Taleb. He comes up a number of times in alchemy. So now I can look at the Nassim Taleb page, and maybe I want to look at Lindy, right? And one thing that I like to do is include tweets and stuff like that. So I showed that earlier of the one that I had of Adam Townsend's recommendation of Machiavellian context. Here, I've just got kind of a random quote from Nassim, a picture from him of the Lindy Cafe, from which the Lindy Principles name derives. That's not really relevant. Again, it's just one of those things that, like, it's so cheap and easy for me to include this, right? Like this amounts to me including a link to a tweet, right? And then it automatically embeds it. So, not a lot of effort to just capture all that context. And you can do this for anything, obviously, right? Like if you found a tweet thread that you found interesting or something, I think there's automated ways even to do that, but I haven't explored that yet. But in any case, you can sort of, you can see how it might be nice to, you might actually want to flip this, right? Like I'm probably not going to include specific bits from Lindy on Nassim Taleb's page, but if I go to the Lindy page, maybe I want to include some context about Nassim Taleb in the Lindy page, right? Or whatever. So you can see how easy it is to sort of flick between different ideas and different concepts, and include bits and pieces from all over the place in, so if I wanted to write a blog post about the prints, right, I could sort of, so I just created a new page here, and you can see the autocomplete makes it super easy to link to other stuff. So I shift click here, and let's say I wanted to include this quote. So hold down Control, bring that over. So if I want to include this quote, maybe I have a section here about, maintain power. And then I do a Control Alt 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, whatever. So maybe I have a section on maintaining power, and I bring this over. This is a trick, the sort of dragging bits and pieces from the sidebar. This is something I learned from Nate Eliason, so shout out to him for that. But yeah, I'm gonna delete all this, since I'm not actually gonna write a blog post about the prints anytime soon, I don't think. I'll go ahead and delete that. Yeah. But yeah, so that kind of gives you a little bit of the idea of how I'll just show this briefly before I sort of end this video, so you can see this is sort of the way that these links manifest themselves. So let me remove log days because I don't really use that, and then this is a slightly prettier view, but you can sort of see like what is the center of the universe of your notes, right? Like, so obviously because I've taken a lot of notes on alchemy at this point and I have a lot of links out to other stuff from there, alchemy is sort of the focal point of this graph, right? Some of the aggregation pages like writers and books and stuff are obviously also pretty heavily linked as well, so you can see that here. But also, I Nassim Taleb, until I started taking notes on alchemy, Nassim Taleb was sort of the center of my graph, and he's sort of linked to all these different ideas, and they're linked to other ideas and so on. So, you can just sort of see how a given idea connects to other things, right? So let's say skin in the game, right? This is both a book title of a book that Nassim Taleb wrote. It's a concept, right? That basically the idea that somebody should bear the consequences of the actions that they take. And Nassim's really foundational point there is that the filtering that occurs, the evolutionary filtering of unsuccessful attempts, right? So if I'm his example that he always uses is a crazy driver who drives 90 miles an hour recklessly, right? That person creates risk for others, right? Obviously they could get in a wreck and hurt somebody, but they also bear that risk. So if they're going 90 miles an hour, it's inevitable that at some point they're going to get into a crash and they're going to remove themselves from the pool of people who, are actively driving. And so that's one of his big points with skin in the game. It's not merely incentives, right? A lot of times it gets sort of bastardized, as many of his ideas do, such that, it's just sort of this watered down milquetoast kind of, give people rewards when they do well or punish them when they do bad. So that's a bit of a tangent, but in any case, you can see that ties into, say, the principal agent problem, right? So principal agent problem being the mismatch between a principal and their agent, right? The principal being, just a person, and an agent being maybe someone like your accountant or something like that, right? So the idea is that you want to align those incentives properly so that they don't have an incentive to pursue their own interest at the expense of your interest, right? So that's somewhat tied to skin in the game, right? That's one way that you might try to solve the principal agent problem. So that's just an example of how you can sort of tie all these concepts together and refine them in tandem, right? So if I have new ideas about new links or quotes or whatever I want to include about skin in the game, then I can link those to, they're automatically linked to the principal agent problem. I could include quotes from each to one, to the other. And so I'm not using it to its fullest extent, but Rome gives you a nice way of tying together lots of disparate ideas, concepts, concrete things like books and authors. And so I've found it really interesting. I hope that they don't end up charging, $1,000 a month for it. That would really be a big bummer, but so far I've liked it. So if you have any ideas for other ways of using Rome, I've basically shown you a couple things that I've learned from watching others' videos about Rome, so I'm sure that there's stuff that I'm missing or could do better. So if you have any tips or anything like that that you found helpful, let me know. Comment in the video or hit me up on Twitter. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Take care.